Thank you very much, Professor Pan, for the introduction, and I would like to thank Professor Ko and the team for the kind invitation to join you today here. Great pleasure. I'm going to discuss about the prevention of type 2 diabetes. But before going there, I come from Finland. This year, Finland was elected as the happiest country in the world, and recently there was evaluation of the human capital based on the various indicators, and again Finland was ranking number 1. So very happy coming from Finland. Anyhow, let's go to the business. It's soon 100 years when Dr. Jocelyn, the very, very famous colleague treating the diabetes in Boston, wrote this paper. It's the first paper published on the prevention of diabetes. And he wrote that at that time, the number of diabetic patients had been rising, and that now it is a time to start prevention. Well, 100 years ago, where are we with the diabetes prevention today? Not very far, if you think globally. Because when you look at the numbers in the world, you see that today we are somewhere 450 million cases of diabetes. And during the last 15 years or so, the number has tripled. Only during the last 15 years, the number has tripled. Well, there are many reasons for that. Of course, the number of patients can grow for many reasons. First of all, if you are treating the patients very well, they don't die. We have a lot of new patients, and the old patients are surviving. This is certainly in the case in diabetes. The treatment has improved tremendously, but there are increasing number of new cases also. That's for sure. Now the diabetes is a slowly progressing disease. It starts gradually with the so-called pre-diabetes, when we say that it's impaired glucose tolerance, postprandial glucose elevation, or fasting glucose elevation in the morning, impaired fasting glycemia. And these are the data from Europe, and very similar in Asian countries, that shows that the prevalence of so-called pre-diabetes in the elderly population is of the order 30 to 40%. There are a lot of cases of pre-diabetes that are likely to progress to diabetes. And what has happened in the recent years is not only that when we look at the numbers of patients, that may be due to the aging of the population, but even the younger age groups, like this survey from Turkey, a very large survey, including 27,000 individuals, showed very clearly that in all age groups, during the 10-year period from 2010 to from 98 to 2010, in every age group, the prevalence of diabetes has been increasing and doubling, basically. In the young age groups, even more. Now, we can look at the other indicators, how diabetes is affecting the health and healthcare in general. And this paper was published a year ago from the United States, evaluating which diseases have where the increase in the cost has been the greatest. And you see here that number 1 is diabetes. So the change in the healthcare costs in the US due to diabetes is number 1 increase in the healthcare costs. There are many other diseases you can see here which are important, but they are not at all as expensive as diabetes is. Now, prevention, what I'm going to discuss, can be done, but we need a lot of knowledge. First of all, we have to understand what the disease is, so we have to have a criteria of the disease. We have to understand risk factors. We have to understand the natural history, how the biology actually works to develop the disease, and to have acceptable methods to identify high-risk individuals who we want to intervene upon, and the methods to influence the risk and modify the risk profile. And this has to be done in the demonstration of with the interventions, so that we can prove the point that the prevention works. And only after that, really, the use of the population level approaches can be implemented. There are many aspects of research and disease development that need to be understood before we really can have a population-wide prevention. Now we can have two different ways to prevent the disease. One is to identify high-risk individuals and bring their risk down, the distribution of whatever risk factor, bring it a little bit down so that the risk level goes to a lower level. The other one is the population approach, where we are actually moving the entire, everybody's risk to a lower level. So these two things require very different approaches, and the best, of course, would be to combine these strategies if you think of the national programs or something like that. The other thing with diabetes, you have to understand that it's a very complex disease. It has a genetic background, starts with the intrauterine so-called programming, early life nutrition leading to a programming, genomic, epigenetic effects, shared behaviors, extended family, gene environment interactions, and so on. So if you think where to actually start and how to start preventing a disease when it's so complex, where would you start? That's a good question. And therefore, it has not been so easy to establish a diabetes prevention project and programs. On the other hand, we know about the modifiable risk factors quite well. At least some of them are very well established, and there is no doubt that these are important factors. We have these risk markers that may not be possible to be modified. Some of them may be, but usually very difficult. And then we have today a couple of potential modifiable risk factors that need to be tested in the further studies. And quite a few studies are ongoing, of course, on these things. But to start prevention, we have a few things that we can handle. Now, I am a scientist, and many of you probably will be scientists as well, and are scientists, and we provide facts. But when we are providing facts, it doesn't change anything. We want to do a prevention. We have to change something. If we are not changing anything, we cannot prevent anything. So that's that we need to have an understanding that there is a need for the behavioral and cultural changes. Now let's go to the natural history of diabetes. UKPDS, United Kingdom Prospective Diabetes Study, was started in the late 70s they screened or identified individuals with newly diagnosed diabetes. And when they looked at beta cell function, pancreatic beta cell function, which produces insulin, they realized that at the time of diagnosis about 50% of the beta cell function was gone already. So there has been a big problem already earlier. And during a 6-year treatment period, the beta cell function went down gradually. And from that, one can extrapolate the time when the whole process started. And the extrapolation shows that it actually was about 12 years earlier when the beta cell function started to diminish. That means that the diabetes, the process leading to diabetes, had started more than 10 years earlier or before people had the clinical symptoms of the disease. And that provides, of course, the window of opportunity to do prevention. So we have a long time to do something. This is a good news in a way. On the other hand, if we are not doing anything, these people with the pre-diabetes, like impaired glucose tolerance, they will, in 10 years' time, they will progress to diabetes, so that about half of the individuals with impaired glucose tolerance will have a diabetes. Some of them revert to a normal glycemia, some of them will stay at the state, but in 10 years or in 15, 20 years, almost everybody becomes diabetic. Now, if you think of the scientific evidence that is needed to establish evidence-based medicine, we have a hierarchy of evidence. The highest level is a systematic reviews and meta-analysis of multiple trials that have been carried out, or the single randomized controlled trials. But also the other type of information will be useful for the evidence, because we cannot always do randomized controlled trials. But if we can, this is the way to provide the evidence. So, and this was the reason why we started in Finland the Finnish diabetes prevention study, because we wanted to provide the proof that prevention works. We chose a very simple approach. First of all, we took only 5 indicators, 5 lifestyle targets that people should meet. And the intervention was based on dietary counseling and physical activity that was promoted, and we provided a free of charge gym for the intervention group. And we wanted to do a randomized control trial to compare intervention group to the control group, which also received some health advice, because when they were high-risk individuals, we could not leave them without any advice. So the interventions we outlined in this way. For instance, an example of a goal have less than 10% energy from saturated fats. How to do it? We try to figure out and explain to our intervention individuals how to do it. Dairy products are important in the Finnish diet, so we have to pay attention to that. But of course, the meals and so on, and the sweets need to have to be taken into account. So we had quite a number of approaches, and depending on the people's their own individual dietary behavior, we could tailor the right way to do this kind of thing. The dietary fiber is very important, but it's very difficult to understand. The lay people have extremely difficult to understand what is a dietary fiber and where to get it and how much to get it and so on. So this was one of the biggest problems for us. On the other hand, in the Finnish diet, we have a lot of items like rye, whole grain bread, porridges, and so on, and a lot of fruit. We had especially berries in the Finnish forest. So in a way, we could promote the fiber intake increase in our population. And the physical activity promotion, of course, there are many different ways to do it, but we both combine the supervised resistance training and also touch advise people to do everything what they could. We use the physical activity diaries to find out what people did and how to improve the situation. But the main result was here. After we looked at the data, on average 4 years of the trial, we saw that there was a 58% reduction in the incidence of diabetes in a control group compared to in the intervention group compared to the control group. So very clear difference between the groups, and also you can see here that the intervention effect was visible already very early on. So for the high-risk individuals for diabetes, you don't have to wait long before you see the benefits from lifestyle changes. So very good news, and this was something really striking. Actually, we did not expect that big difference between the groups. I would have been happy with a 35% difference. That would have been clinically very important already, but we had much more. And then came the data from the US diabetes prevention program, similar findings, and again exactly the same, 58%, exactly the same. And also good news was there that all ethnic groups, as you can see here, they benefited the same way from the lifestyle intervention. So now we have two trials, controlled trials to show that the intervention works. But this was not only these two trials, there have been several others now from the Netherlands, UK, China, India, Japan, and so on. So now we have a lot of evidence that the intervention works for high-risk individuals. So, concept proven. Diabetes prevention is possible. And also, there have been other studies, smaller studies, and with a short duration, some only 6 months, some only 2 years. And you can see here that all these trials have shown the positive effect altogether, summarized 31% risk reduction in a very short period of time. Now the next question, however, is that if we are having benefit from lifestyle intervention during a couple of years trial, what happens in the long term to these individuals? And our data showed that when we have this 58% effect from the intervention here, after about 4 years, the effect has remained there for 15 years now, and even longer. And the difference between the groups actually has been increasing over time a little bit more. So altogether, the onset of diabetes in the intervention group was postponed by, on average, 5 years, which is 5 years is very good, because if we are thinking of complications of diabetes that may occur, if you can postpone any consequence of diabetes by 5 years, we will have an incredibly important public health consequences. But not only our study showed that the long-term benefits are there, the Chinese Dachshund trial that was not actually randomized control trial, but there was intervention clinics and control clinics, and showed that in the 6 years time there was a 50% risk reduction, and the measurement after 20 years showed that there was still 43% risk reduction here. And also, they were able to look at the complications, one of the specific complications being diabetic retinopathy, and after about 8 years, there was a difference, or starting to be a difference between the groups, that the intervention group had a lower incidence of complications. So that is very good news. Another interesting trial recently published from India shows that the lifestyle intervention using a SMS, that's the text messages. They had hundreds of different text messages sent to people depending on their profiles. And after 2 years of this kind of action, they had a 36% risk reduction in the intervention group that received the text messages compared with the people who did not, who just at the baseline were told that they should change their lifestyle. And now they looked at the data 5 years later, and there was still about 30% risk reduction. Very simple SMS messages, which is very inexpensive and can be done anywhere. People don't have to come to the clinic to listen what to eat and what to, how to exercise, but it all comes with the text messages. And these kind of apps and so on, this is probably a future for health promotion for many diseases, including type 2 diabetes. Now, going back to our own study, see here that there were changes in the nutrient intakes and the physical activity. The changes do not look very large, and obviously you cannot change dramatically, and that was not our aim. We wanted to have the health behaviors that can be permanent, and therefore small changes in these parameters is already enough. For instance, body weight, our aim was on average 5 kilos reduction in body weight, and we almost reached that. Little bit gain, but after 6 years still to see that almost the same 4 kilogram weight reduction. So we wanted to have a permanent lifestyle changes that people can keep. And it has been also shown in the other trials like American DPP and the Swedish study, earlier one, which was non-randomized, but again showed that you can keep a lower body weight for many years. Chinese Belgian trial had not much weight reduction, but these people mostly were not obese, so that was not the aim to reduce the body weight because majority were non-obese individuals. In our data, as in many other weight reduction studies, have been showing that the more you can reduce body weight, the better it is. Like here, 7% weight reduction has about 30% or 70% lower risk of diabetes compared with no weight change. And of course, if the high-risk individuals are increasing body weight very rapidly, the incidence of diabetes goes up. But the weight changes are related to dietary changes and physical activity. Here you see that the total calorie intake was associated with the weight change, fiber intake increased, fat intake decreased. Energy density seems to be probably most powerful indicator of what happened in the weight change. Now, during our extended follow-up, when we had stopped the intervention, we invited people to come to the clinic every year for the assessments. So we assessed also what happened to their diet. Well, people say that once you stop the intervention, people have a relapse and they go back to their original diet. No, it did not happen that way. You see here total fat intake. Total fat intake after the intervention. Very nicely, the intervention group, blue, dark blue here, goes down. 1 year later, when no intervention was provided, remained the same level. 4 years later, a little bit up, but compared with the control group, very clearly at a lower level. Saturated fat intake, the same way, and the fiber intake increase was also remaining there. So people are learning and can keep their healthier lifestyle once they have received adequate intervention program. One thing I mentioned that the intervention effect was very rapid, so we can see the change is happening very quickly once we have initiated the lifestyle intervention. And it is true, for instance, in this Indian diabetes prevention program, they looked at the early improvement of changes. So those individuals who after 6 months had reverted to the normal glucose, there during the 3-year trial, their incidence of diabetes went down very beautifully, whereas those who remained as impaired glucose tolerance at 6 months had a very little effect. Now, the American DPP looked at the weight changes at 6 months, and you see here in the lifestyle intervention group, if you had a weight change even a little bit, 3 to 5 kilos, there was already about 40% risk reduction, and the more people had lost weight during the first 6 months, the lower was the overall risk during the entire trial. So very early on, if we can see the changes, metabolic changes and the weight changes, that gives us the indication that these are the people who are benefiting the most from the lifestyle intervention. Now, if we want to translate this information to the population level, if we have a small change in body weight compared with the current situation, for instance, in the Finnish population 2002, in a survey, the mean was 28 BMI. If you would reduce it to the 27, what happens to the prevalence of obesity? So that means, like what we saw in our trials, about 2.5 to 4 kilos body weight reduction. That would mean at the population level, if you can do it, 13% reduction in overweight or obesity, and 20% reduction in obesity. And this can be done. We have shown that 2 to 4 kilogram weight reduction is possible. Now, the physical activity was very important, and you can imagine that the people who had impaired glucose tolerance, pre-diabetes, many of them had no physical activity whatsoever, and only about 10% had a moderate or heavy physical activity. This is a typical profile of the people with impaired glucose tolerance. Now, during the trial, those individuals who increased the physical activity most, that is now the tertiles, and this tertile, highest tertile increased 3.8 hours per week, almost 4 hours per week physical activity, compared with those individuals who did not, who actually reduced their physical activity. Here there is 66% lower risk of diabetes, adjusted for all other factors. So very clearly, increasing physical activity is extremely important. It's not only that you increase your leisure time, sports activities and physical activity, but just a so-called light physical activity, household work, gardening, dancing, walking the stairs, anything, using a bicycle, that shows a similar pattern. So you don't have to have a really sports if you have a profile like that where you did not do the physical activity in the past. And interestingly, when we looked at the people who at baseline had been active in their past, they benefited very nicely in the intervention. They had an additional 57% risk reduction. Control group, of course, like in many other studies, prospective studies, they had a lower risk of diabetes if they had been active in the past. But this was quite an interesting thing to see that these people who had been active in the past, they benefit from lifestyle intervention. And we heard in the morning about sarcopenia and these things. It's obviously is related to that people have a bigger muscle mass to start with. I think we didn't measure it, but that's what I think. Our diet still has many other aspects than the dietary fiber and so on. The Spanish Credimed trial, they looked at the olive oil supplementation to the Mediterranean diet or nuts and showed that compared with the low-fat control diet, these individuals had a clearly low risk of developing diabetes, also cardiovascular disease and some other conditions. So there are many aspects of diet that can be manipulated, and obviously this is an area of research to be carried out in the future. Now, one aspect of lifestyle intervention is always the adherence. So it's any treatment, basically. If you prescribe a drug to a patient and the patient doesn't take it, of course the drug has no effect. The same with the lifestyle intervention. If you advise people to change their lifestyle, if they don't, of course there is no effect whatsoever. So adherence is one of the important things that need to be understood. When we looked at the adherence to the lifestyle intervention, we're looking at the targets, how people had reached these targets. I can see that the risk reduction was very visible with any of these targets if people had met this kind of lifestyle goal. But most importantly, these individuals who had reached all 5 targets, or 4 out of 5, nobody became diabetic. Not a single person became diabetic. So this is the whole magic. We have to have multimodal tools for lifestyle intervention. Not a single thing, but combining various things. And this is really, really the most important message, I think, from our studies. But it's not the other studies that have shown it. It was already much earlier. This knowledge has been there, but how poorly it has been applied, this is something incredible. So Hippocrates already pointed out that the both food and exercise are needed to produce health. Now, some words about the observational studies. I have picked up here the U.S. cardiovascular health study. They looked at the older individuals and the incidence of diabetes by lifestyle indicators. And they had 6 indicators of healthy lifestyle: physical activity, healthy diet, non-smoking, moderate alcohol, no obesity, and low waist circumference. And if people had all these 6 items, nobody became diabetic, and there was a linear relation. The more healthy lifestyle traits, the lower risk of diabetes. We have done a similar study in Finland, a larger one, 20,000 men and 20,000 women, 13-year follow-up, and we looked at the healthy lifestyle traits, no obesity, moderate alcohol consumption, high physical activity, high vegetable consumption, no smoking. And of Finnish women, approximately half will meet 4 or 5 of these targets. Of men, much less. When we look at the 13-year incidence of diabetes, you can see very clearly again here that the more people have these healthy lifestyle traits, the lower was the risk. Compared with the reference 0 to 1 healthy lifestyles, those who had all 5 had a 90% lower risk. 90% lower risk. And this is without any specific intervention. This is just observational follow-up of the people who are living in their own environments. And very, very powerful. There's multiple healthy lifestyle indicators. And the other thing is important that the lifestyle intervention worked very well in the older individuals. Actually, the oldest people benefited most of lifestyle intervention. So, as we heard already in the morning, so older people can benefit physiologically from various dietary and physical activity things. But again, it has to be combined, not only one single thing. And that's again proven here. Now finally a couple of words about the future. Precision medicine is very much discussed that we have to tailor interventions individually because in no way that we only promote one way of living, one way of doing the things. And for type 2 diabetes, good news is that many of these issues that are needed for precision medicine are known. We know many genes, we know lifestyle, environmental factors, biomarkers, and we can identify high-risk individuals in a very easy way. For instance, using the one which we developed in Finland, it's probably the most commonly used globally at the moment. And so we came up from the observational study for 8 different items that are easy without any laboratory work to measure, and then we can summarize the total risk score and get the idea whether people have a low risk or very high. You can do it yourself in the internet and so on. So very simple. The original data showed that if people had a high risk, most of the people became diabetic in 10 years, and the low risk individuals hardly anybody. So very clearly we can pick up individuals who have a high risk and start working with these individuals to identify what to do with them. We applied this risk score system in our diabetes prevention study retrospectively and looked at the risk score categories here, and in a control group the risk went up as in our original observational study, and the intervention group the flat trend, so that this incremental risk could be removed by lifestyle intervention very nicely. Number needed to treat in the whole, our total population was 8.3, but here it was only 3.6 in the 3 years time. Very, very efficient way. And it actually picked up 37% of the people in our trial. So this seems to be working extremely well. Now it has been adopted in many different countries and languages and so on, so it has become a very important tool to initiate the precision medicine. But then the next step is genetics, and if we want to profile people by their genetic background, we need to go to the laboratory work. James Neal from the US, he coined the term thrifty genotype, meaning that these genes that are now producing diabetes or associated with diabetes, one time in the past they were useful for survival, and the question is whether it is true or not, but very likely it has some meaning. Now today we know about 400 signals in the genome associated with diabetes in over 200 genetic loci. So a lot of genes are known, and we can say that genetic susceptibility to type 2 diabetes is not a rare condition at all. Most of us are carrying one or two of these susceptibility markers, so very likely we cannot get rid of these things, but we have to live with that. We know that the more you have these susceptibility genes, the higher is the risk of diabetes. But on the other hand, with these genetic markers, we cannot really pick up very well those who are at the high risk. We need these sort of simple risk scores to identify the high-risk individuals. Now, how the intervention works in the high-risk individuals, genetically high-risk individuals, just take one example, which is this alpha-2 beta-adenosine receptor gene. In the control group, people who had inherited from both parents the Flu9 allele, they had the highest risk. But you see here in the intervention group, they had the lowest risk. After lifestyle intervention, the risk dropped dramatically. So high-risk individuals, genetic, most from lifestyle intervention, I mean genetically high-risk individuals. When we looked at the what kind of lifestyle intervention actually works in these people with the Flu9 alleles, it was dietary change, but they did not benefit at all from physical activity. And that is of course known that there are phenotypes that do not metabolically benefit from physical activity, and therefore we can start tailoring individual precision medicine type of interventions based on the genotype and the risk profiling. Still a word about the children, which has now shown that in the 4 decades there has been tenfold increase in the childhood obesity. So this is really a terrible situation that is happening. And of course, you know all these metabolic consequences of obesity already in childhood. It happens all of them as it happens in the older individuals. Now, the incidence of diabetes has gone up, and you see here that in the American Indians and Asian and the Pacific Islanders, they seem to be having teenagers high risk of diabetes. But the good news is that there are studies looking at the physical activity and nutrition in children. For instance, this study from Finland, where they had the intervention, 2-year intervention in school children, and in those whose physical activity increased, the insulin resistance went down 23%, whereas in the control group 46%. So 50% lower increase in the insulin resistance, and the same when the diet quality improved. The insulin resistance increase was much less. So the good news is that lifestyle intervention works. We can help people with a genetically or otherwise high risk for type 2 diabetes, and also these studies in children, they already are emerging from a number of studies studies, but a very few studies in children have been carried out globally to understand the prevention of diabetes. Maybe you can do here more studies, and I would really advise to concentrate on young individuals. That is something where you need a lot of data to understand what happens. So thank you very much for this attention.
Thank you so much for this very comprehensive and wonderful talk. On behalf of the society, I'd like to present to you this appreciation. That's all. We're standing in front of the flower. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.